Rendering your own lard is really, really easy. It just takes a little bit of time up front. So basically what you're going to want to do is, if you get a pig butchered, whether you raise it yourself and butcher it, or you have somebody else raise it and you buy into it, you are going to want to ask for your pig fat. And this, what you're going to get is some what's called leaf fat, or the kidney fat off of the pig. And that's what you want to render down. Now basically what rendering down means is that you are going to slowly heat up this fat to take out any of the impurities and all of the moisture out of it. And that will make it shelf stable. And then it'll also make it just pure fat. So how you do that is just exactly what I said, low and slow. You're going to heat it up on your stovetop in a nice, good, heavy-bottomed pot, which I like to use my Dutch oven. And you go ahead and just turn your stovetop on very low, and you heat up your pig fat all the way down. And I'll show you what I mean. So there are many ways that you are able to do this. And you probably could research a bunch and find that there are people that say to do it in the crock pot, people that say to do it in the oven, add water, don't add water, all of these different methods, and you're wondering what is the right method. Well, I can't really tell you exactly what the right method is, but the way I learned is to not add water and to do it right here on the stovetop, and I think that that is probably the best way to do it. So what I have here is all of my pig fat. Now the best way to handle this fat is if it is a little bit frozen. So when it's super thawed out, then it is a lot harder to work with. The butcher shop that we went through when we first moved here to Missouri, they actually shredded all of my pig fat, which I don't prefer, but it is what I have and that's what I have to work with, so it's fine. But if you can, I would rather get sheets of the pig fat, of the leaf fat, and then go ahead and chop them, slice them up into really small little pieces. That helps to not have them all bunched together. With it shredded this small in this process, it does get kind of bunchy. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and turn my stove on to 2. Now I am not going to move that temperature this entire time. So it'll always stay on 2. I have an electric oven or electric stove. If you have a gas powered, just go ahead and put it on low and leave it there the entire time. Now I'm going to take, so some of it has stayed chunked up and some of it is kind of shredded and in little bits. This little bits of pig fat I'm going to go ahead and put into the pot first. And what this does is it kind of coats the bottom of it and gets it started. When you put in the bigger chunks, they can get scorched, and that's why a lot of people say to add water. I just choose not to, because what we're trying to do is remove all of the moisture and impurities out of the pig fat. If you're adding water in, then it just takes a little bit longer and kind of alleviates the point of what you're doing. Hi, Pepper. You want to help? Okay. Why don't you go ahead and get the spoon, and we need to get you a step, huh? All right, I'm back with my helper now. Okay, let's go ahead and stir it. So what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and stir your fat around until it starts to melt down and you get a really good even coat on the bottom. Now you don't have to stir super constant, but you don't want to walk away. So if you walk away, that you're kind of giving yourself a little bit of a chance for it to scorch on the bottom, and so that's what we're trying to avoid. So you're just going to stir it up and you're going to let it get nice and coated and melted on the bottom. Once you kind of have a thicker layer of fat already melted down, then you'll go ahead and add in the rest of your pork fat. Okay, so your little pieces that you started with have melted and started to sizzle. Again, my stovetop is set to 2 and I have not touched it, which when you hear this sizzling, you know that it is starting to cook out all of the impurities and the moisture. So now I'm going to go ahead and add in all of my bigger chunks to start rendering everything down. Okay, so as my helper, squeeze this by you, stirs it, I'm going to go ahead and add in the bigger chunks and let it start rendering down all of it. Now, how you know that you are done, which will take quite a bit of time, so it is going to take a couple hours, is I won't move my temperature the entire time. And once it stops sizzling and bubbling, you know that it has reached everything out of it and you're ready to move on to the next step. So I will show you as we go the different stages of what you will see. But just know before you start this project that it does take quite a few hours to render down lard. Okay, so we are at a full sizzle right now. You see all the foaming, all of the bubbles. And this is the stage that you are welcome to walk away and come back and stir it frequently, but you don't have to stand and do a constant stir. But keep an eye on it. There's enough melted fat, obviously, that you won't scorch the bottom any longer, but you want to keep an eye on it. Again, the key to rendering down a perfect lard is low and slow, so I have not touched my stovetop. It is still set to 2. And we will continue until these bubbles and the foaming goes away. Okay, while my pig fat is rendering down and it is bubbly and getting all of the impurities out, I'm going to get the next step all set up. And what I do is, because this is, it was already shredded, I'm going to have a lot of little pieces. Now if you were to get a sheet of the leaf fat, and you were cutting those into slices, you're going to have nice big crispy chunks at the end of it, and you can just scoop those right on out and then strain into your jar. I don't have the luxury of that. Everything's going to be real tiny, almost like very ground up ground beef. And so I'm going to first set up a bowl with a thin strainer and then a piece of cheesecloth on it. I'm going to go ahead and pour my pot right on into that first. And then I also have a clean quart-sized jar and a wide mouth funnel. I will go ahead and stick my cheesecloth on here and then strain it from this bowl into here to make sure to catch all the little pieces. If you have any pieces inside of your jar at all, it's not going to be shelf stable. So I do put this on the shelf until I'm ready to use it. Once I open it to start using out of it, I do keep it in the fridge from there on out. You will use a canning lid and ring so that it's nice and sealed. On this jar, I do not can this, but with the heat of it, it will seal really nicely and keep kind of everything aired in. And so I do use a canning lid and ring, and I will keep it on my shelf until I crack it open for the first time and start scooping out of it. Okay, so now we have reached a point where all of the bubbling has stopped, which means that we are ready to strain it and pour it into our jars. So we are ready to strain this. Now, like I said before, if you have leaf fat, the strips of it, and then you cut into strips, you can go ahead and just scoop those right on out. Put them on a plate, kind of pat them to get all the grease off of them. And a lot of people will salt them and eat them as a little tasty, like a pork rind type of a snack. Never had them, but I hear they're delicious. Mine is a little bit different because, I don't know if you'll be able to see it in the video, but because it was shredded, it's really almost like a ground beef. And so a lot of this can get into my jar if I'm not careful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and strain it in a big anchor size measuring bowl, and then with a strainer on top of that and a piece of cheesecloth. Actually it's a double piece of cheesecloth. And I'm going to strain it in that first before I strain it again into my jar. And this is just going to help protect it, because if any of these particles get into my jar, it's not going to be shelf stable. So, okay. Now your jar or your pot should be very hot, so be careful. This is hot oil. And I'm going to go ahead and strain it through. Okay. And of course I did make a little bit of a mess, but that'll be alright. Ooh, now be careful. Hot oil. And nice sides here so I don't dump any of this. And I'll go ahead and put this back into here. And I'll get a fresh cheesecloth to be able to strain it now into my jar. Okay, so here I have another piece of fresh cheesecloth. I'm going to go ahead and stick that on over my wide mouth funnel just because I want to make sure to catch anything else that could be in here. Now, as you can see, this is very dark, and that's okay. It's actually going to cool white. If you have done this correctly and you have gotten all of the moisture and impurities out, this will be a nice pure white lard that you can cook with. You can also use it in pastries. It won't have a super porky smell. Now it will when you're actually doing it, but once it's completely rendered down and cooled, it will not. So I'm going to go ahead and pour this into my jar and make sure that I'm not going to spill over. And it didn't quite fill a quart jar, but that's all right. And now I will go ahead and take this hot lard and put a lid and a ring on it and leave it right here on my counter to cool overnight before labeling it and putting it on my shelf. Okay, so I have 2 jars of lard here, and so I've waited the 24 hours and now your lard is completely cool and you have them in your jars. Now I have 2 here because I want to show you the difference between the 2. If you render down your lard and everything goes smoothly and you get all the impurities out and all of that is done correctly, you're going to get a nice pure white snowy lard like this. And I keep this right on the shelf, and once I open it and start using out of it, I stick it in the fridge and leave it there. But you can use this in pastries, in pie crusts, in sauteing vegetables, any of those things. It's a very delicious, healthy fat to cook with. Now, if you didn't do it correctly or didn't do it long enough, I'd say, that would be probably your main source, meaning all the moisture and all of the impurities didn't come completely out. You're going to get one that's a little bit more yellow. And it's still very usable. You can definitely use this. I just wouldn't use it in a pastry or a pie crust. And the reason being is because you're going to get a little bit more of a porky flavor to it. And so it's really delicious when you're frying up pork chops. It's really delicious when you're sauteing vegetables in it, but probably not in your pie crust or a pastry that you're trying to make for a dessert. So definitely you don't need to throw away one that you didn't do long enough. It's still very usable. I wouldn't keep it on the shelf. I would put it in the fridge just to be safe, because knowing that all of the impurities and the moisture didn't come out, it could mold on your shelf. So I definitely keep it in the refrigerator, but it still is very usable. So those will be the 2 outcomes that you would get. What you're looking for is the pure white, but you know, even someone who's rendered down lard many times gets the yellow, so you just never know. So I hope this was helpful, and I hope that you go and use this healthy fat, render down some lard if you're butchering your own animals, because it really is simple and it's very delicious, and I really highly enjoy cooking with it. I hope this was helpful, and we'll see you next time. Take care.